Hello and welcome! I am Annemie and this is Euro Truck Simulator 2. The name of the show is Euro Truck Soliloquy, that's what I meant to say. But yes, the conceit is, as those of you who watched before will know, that I play Euro Truck Simulator 2 as some sort of background noisy thing. I'm not worried too much about obeying the law. In fact, I think I've got laws turned off. I'm not too worried about sleep. I've got that mechanic turned off. I'm just doing something with my hands whilst talking about things which have happened this week that interest me. Or in this case, over the last 2 weeks, because it's January. Actually, it's February now. It's February. It was January. And news was somewhat thin on the ground, even thinner than it was before. And I hadn't actually been playing all that many new things, so I really didn't think that I'd have enough to make a show, so I've saved all that up. Which still, to be honest, isn't all that much, but we're going to have a talk about some interesting things which have happened regardless. For those of you who are interested, we're on our way from Marseille to Strasbourg with, what have we got? Fuel oil. Got some nice, tasty fuel oil. There we go. So much oil. I'm sure that oil shouldn't be on fire, but, you know, we'll cope. So, the first and probably the biggest news of this week is loot boxes, everyone's favourite topic. Hurrah! In Star Wars Battlefront 2, everyone's favourite game. Hurrah! But yes, Andrew Wilson, the CEO of EA, and Blake Jorgensen, the CFO of EA, have both hinted that loot boxes might be making their way back into the game, as it was always imagined that they would, once the heat had somewhat died down. And this comes hot on the heels of the news that EA sold... Ooh. There we go. The EA sold 1 million fewer copies of the game than they had projected they would sell, which they blamed on the loot box controversy. Notice they blamed it on the controversy, not on themselves making an unrewarding game. Interesting. I mean, it's amazing that you can be disappointed in the sales of a Star Wars game the year a new Star Wars film comes out, which a lot of people seem to say is actually quite good. That astonishes me, but if there's any company who could do it, EA, I believe in you, and you met my expectations. But that's not the news I want to talk about. Some people... which way do I go? This way. Sorry, it wasn't entirely clear. But that's not the news I particularly want to talk about with Star Wars Battlefront 2. That's some interesting news. Let's feel bad for the big corporation only selling, I think it was 7 million copies instead of 8 million. Oh, so sad. Only 7 million. But it was actually a statement made by the CEO, Andrew Wilson, on an earnings call. Now, earnings calls, as I know because I just looked this up, these are conference calls. Do we still call them conference calls when they're usually done online? Conference Skypes? Seems to sound less good. Conference VoIPs? Conference VoIP. That sounds dreadful, actually. But yes, whilst conversing with EA investors and financial analysts, Andrew Wilson talked a little bit about why he thought that Star Wars Battlefront 2 might have underperformed, why it might not have been as well received, essentially why the people in that room didn't make as much money as they wanted to make. And he said that it was all down to the experience of the game. His exact words are, "We never intended to build an experience that was unfair or lacking clear progression. which is reasonable. Nobody wants to build those experiences that are unfair or that lack clear progression, except that's not actually what he said. If he'd said that, then kudos to the guy. However, what he actually said was, we never intended to build an experience that could be seen as unfair or lacking clear progression. It's amazing how much a single word can completely alter the meaning of a sentence. And it seems to have revealed more than Andrew Wilson would have wanted it to. Because I think that we can all agree that EA is not a company that cares about games that are unfair or that lack clear progression. They care about games that make them money. As a lot of corporations will do, but EA seems to be so impulsive, so short-termist. A lot of other publishers, they want to make money too. That is what they're here for, but they are here for the long-term money. And I feel like they want to have more public trust. Whereas EA only cares about whether or not they get caught. Very similarly to how it seems Bungie are acting at the moment. But it really makes me sad because EA has made some great games. Even recently, there are really talented studios working for EA, and EA has greenlit projects which seem a little bit out of the box. I mean, the biggest one I can think of, although this was, what, about a decade ago now? So, I mean, that shows one thing, but Mirror's Edge first-person parkour. I mean, that was a brave thing for them to do. First-person parkour has since actually gotten bigger than that. I've not played Mirror's Edge Catalyst and probably won't, to be honest. But it's become, I mean, Valley, an explorative first-person platform game, first-person platform parkour game, is one which I absolutely adore, and I think that the first-person mode doesn't actually detract from it at all, but in fact enhances it. And Mirror's Edge did kind of pioneer that, and that was EA's job, so good job, EA. Westwood Studios, who used to be under EA, I loved the Command & Conquer and Red Alert games. Although, if memory serves, I think that most of the ones I have fondest memories for were before they were under were they always under EA? I don't remember the EA logo being on Red Alert or Red Alert 2 or Tiberian Sun. I remember it being on Red Alert 3, which was kind of rubbish, actually. Some cool ideas, but just didn't feel as good and had that sort of multiplayer focus, which is weird in a real-time strategy game. But, you know, it did have attack bears, so how bad could the game have been? But EA really needs to build up consumer trust. It's won, I believe it won some awards for being an LGBTQ-friendly company, which is good. That is always something that I like to see and makes me hope for EA's future. They also, and I know this is a very small sample size, but when my Origin account got hacked, I had to it got hacked by some Russian individual, and I went through customer service, and they were all very friendly, very helpful. Oh, what did I hit? Oh well. And got it resolved very quickly when they could have just I mean, I can't access my Games Windows Live account, let's put it that way. So EA is one step above Microsoft. Which I know is like saying that Stalin was a little bit better than Hitler, but baby steps. But these features make me want EA's corporate culture to actually be good. These individual instances of a bright shining light make me want to think, hey EA, you can be a positive force in this industry rather than exhibiting all of the worst symptoms of capitalism gone rampant. And I like capitalism. You like capitalism. We all like capitalism. But let's not be excessive about it, alright? But going back to Bungie, there was some news coming out of Destiny this week. And it's not actually about them implementing some change without consulting or informing the community first. So, well done you, Bungie. And there was this statement from Tyson Green, who is one of the senior designers at Bungie. He said, "We know you missed Destiny 1 armor shader mechanics. We're looking at ways to reintegrate that capability without losing the ability to shade weapons, ghosts, ships, sparrows, or customize specific pieces of armor. We also understand you want shaders to be more freely usable and not limited by availability. We're looking at reintroducing shader collections, or a way to get copies of a shader in your possession." For those of you who don't know, and again as someone who doesn't really play multiplayer games, so my in-depth knowledge of Destiny and shader mechanics is non-existent, but I've got a superficial working knowledge of the game. Shaders are how you colour your gear. And I believe what was the case in the original was that once you unlocked a shader, you could just colour stuff. It was essentially an unlockable skin which you could then apply to many things as you wanted. That was one of the things they changed in Destiny 2. They made shaders a consumable. So once you'd used, I think your shaders would come in packs of 3, I want to say. But you'd get your shaders in a small pack, and once you'd used all of them, so once you'd customized 3 pieces of your gear, they were gone, and you'd have to wait to get them again. And I believe there were also more of them than in Destiny 1, and they would only drop from randomized crates. So it wasn't as if you could go to an in-game shop with in-game money and buy in-game colours for your in-game gear. Nope, you had to go to Bungie's virtual shop and pay for this in-game colour for your in-game gear with out-of-game money. And you wouldn't even necessarily know. I think it was randomised. I'm not 100% on that, but I think it was your typical loot box shenanigan. The other important information here is that so shaders came in packs of 3. Your gear had, I think it was 4 or 5 different bits to it. So if you got a shader pack, you could not colour your entire set of armour. And a cynical individual would look at that and say, you're just trying to get people to complete the set. And it seems like they were. But now they are talking about reversing course on this. Now, something which I've not looked up, but which I will look up now whilst I'm driving along, because it interests me, and I meant to do this beforehand, and I could, you know, stop this and look it up and then come back to you with what I wanted to, or I could just talk and ramble whilst typing into Google Destiny 2. But let's have a look. Let's also try not to ram into the back of this transit van. So this game has now been out for 6 months or so. So its release date for PS4 and Xbox One was September the 6th. So we've had about 6 months, 5 or 6 months. Somehow I suspect that, and I don't have figures to back this up, but I would imagine that the majority of microtransaction and loot box sales will come when the game is new and fresh, when people are most excited to play it, when people have already spent money on it, so think, a little more can't hurt, when they see a few people with this really great looking gear and they think, oh, I want to be one of those. So reversing course after 6 months feels like they're trying to look like the good guys. Like Bradley Whitford and... oh, what was the name of the other guy in that show? Again, I really should look up my references beforehand. Oh, if someone knows the name of the other guy and the good guys, post it in the comments, because it's gonna bug me. But, or I could just, look it up now, in order to, delay the whole thing because of a quick one-off joke. But yes, Bungie wanting to look like the good guys after all of the controversy and mishandling that they've been experiencing and been committing lately. Colin Hanks, that was the name of the guy. Ugh, I'm so annoyed with myself. But without actually changing their revenue stream all that much, because I really don't think that people would have been buying that many, spending that much on microtransactions after the player base has plummeted. It just seems like trying to bail out the Titanic at this point. You're not gonna get audience goodwill on Destiny 2, Bungie. It's at this point you've probably got to cut and run. You've lost this battle, try and make a really great game next time, either as Destiny 3, or if you feel like the brand name has been somewhat burned, something new. I feel like they've still got enough brand recognition and goodwill from Halo that people would be willing to give them one more shot. But they're just digging a hole for themselves, and now I'm seeing this as an admission that Bungie kinda knew that the shaders thing wasn't good. That it was just there for profit. But this is one of the things I'm positive for in the industry, and that is that I think that we're all becoming more informed and educated about things. That the rise of games media on YouTube in particular, that people are just sort of tuning into little bits here and there, that they're not having to go to a dedicated site to get games news, that they can just, watch it whilst having their breakfast or something like that, or whilst doing something different. That we're all becoming more savvy. Which means that I think monetization models have to account for multiple levels now of human psychology. It's not just the levels they've been working on at the moment, which is mostly, ooh, shiny, wanna have shiny, it's that we are now observing, and we're able to observe these psychological tricks in effect, and we can complain and we can make our voices heard pretty quickly if we want to. Companies know when the consumer base is upset now. I remember back in the day where I got my games news once a month in a magazine. I used to get Games Master magazine, which was really enjoyable publication. But because it only came out once a month, it was just mostly previews and reviews. And there was no real time to go at all in depth with news because they just had to keep abreast of all of the releases. But that's changed, and it's a change for the better, and I really like this. So whilst a lot of people are doom and gloom about this industry and the fact that it seems to be becoming more and more exploitative, it also seems to be becoming more aware and receptive of criticism, and not out of the goodness of their hearts, but because of the damage it can do to their bottom line. Going back to what Blake Jurgensen said, blaming the loot box controversy for Star Wars Battlefront 2's poor sales, that wouldn't have happened 10-15 years ago. If we had the technology to deliver loot boxes to people, the controversy just wouldn't have been able to be that concentrated, and they wouldn't have known about it. And large corporations are frequently very slow to change and be aware of things, but it's happening. So I'm waiting for a time, and I don't think it's going to be too long, when the industry is going to tick up again in its consumer practices, where it's not going to assume that we're all gullible money wallets. That was not a good sentence. That it's not going to assume that we are just a bank account for them to take money from, but that we are human beings and we can recognize things and we have intellect. We are not we're not just an algorithm that spits out money for them. We're not a statistic. And I feel that was the case in the past, simply because of the lack of communication. But yes, that makes me pleased. The next bit that makes me quite pleased is some news from Activision Blizzard. And that is the Blizzard are now monitoring YouTube for problematic players, for offensive players, for essentially players that break their community guidelines. And Jeff Kaplan, the Overwatch lead designer, had this to say: "We now proactively seek out social media sites like YouTube, for example, and look for incidents of very toxic behavior, and track down the accounts that are participating, and action them oftentimes before anyone's even reported them." Now, I do immediately see the issues with this. And that is that there are some... The biggest fear is that if someone is somewhat critical of Overwatch, if somebody reveals bugs or exploits in the game, then Blizzard is now there to look at them and potentially to ban those players. And that would not be good, to put it bluntly. When am I arriving? Thursday at 9 o'clock. I've got loads of time. I'll take a rest break by the side of the road to make it day, because day is nicer to drive in than night. If I remember. But yeah, you don't want Blizzard to be using this monitoring to shut down people who are revealing the ways in which the game is broken. You also don't want Blizzard blocking people who have negative things to say about the game. Those are the two big ones I'm worried about. The next one I'm worried about is a free speech issue. Although, it's not a free speech issue, because Blizzard's games, any games, are essentially a private clubhouse, and you can set your own rules for who can be in there and who can't. But I have huge issue with people saying, hey, you can't be in here because of what you said when you were not in here. Right? So if somebody made a video of them playing Overwatch and overdubbed strings of profanities at the other players, I think that that person would be... I wouldn't think that person was a good person. I would think them slightly... well, not slightly, very immature, and I would, if I came across the video, probably give it a stern dislike. But I would not want to see that player banned from Overwatch. What I would like to see is them using the videos to see who had been creating a toxic environment in-game. If somebody had been, as we talked about previously, been demeaning and insulting women just because they're women, if they'd been using racial slurs, if they'd been using ableist slurs, then in-game, then Blizzard has every right to say, no, we're not going to give you a platform for spreading these epithets, which we do not endorse. We're not going to give you a platform for that. And I hope that's what's going to happen. But at the heart of it, I like that this means that there is more human oversight of the platform. Now, this next bit's going to get a little bit self-serving, but this is my issue with YouTube's content ID. Sorry, I might have hit the microphone there, so that might have been an unpleasant sound for you all. Doing this one-handed is not easy. Trying to pour myself some more coffee whilst driving on the hard shoulder. Come on. But yeah, my problem with the YouTube Content ID system... come on, there we go. Successfully poured coffee, and nobody knew that I was even away from the game slightly. Is that it puts the emphasis on the publishers to say what is allowed and what isn't, rather than having human oversight. There's a rest stop coming up. Do I need to go right? Yes. Maybe should get some more fuel as well at some point. Oh, there's no petrol station here. I will just sleep. So, this video should be going up today at time of recording. But yesterday, at time of publishing, this is my first video on the PC release of Final Fantasy XII, The Zodiac Age. Final Fantasy XII being a game that I absolutely adore. And I'm hoping to at least get a couple more videos up on it, but this is going to be dependent on Content ID, because Square Enix did decide that no, because some of the cutscenes in there were stuff that they'd flagged, it was theirs. And now I have to appeal to Square Enix to say, hey, this is kind of fair use, I'm transforming this with my commentary over the top of it, and it's also acting as a review. Please, could I not be making money for you? That would be nice. And I've got no problem with videos being automatically flagged if they infringe on some sort of copyrightable material, like video. That is fair enough. But then to possibly have somebody at YouTube look over the stuff and see, okay, is this just a reproduction of somebody else's work? Is this just, for instance, maybe all the cutscenes from Final Fantasy XII? I would be okay with Square Enix saying, no, we don't want people to be able to view this as a film without us making money from it. We worked hard on this. That is fair enough. But if it's actually transformative content, and I know what the argument against that is, that it would create a lot of work. Well, firstly, YouTube makes a lot of money. I would also be somewhat okay if YouTube decided to actually give less money to the creators in exchange for paying for people to look for copyrighted material. Not too much, YouTube, Google, but a small amount to allow for monitoring. But I don't think it would actually take all that long. In all honesty, you don't need to watch that much of a video to see if it is transformative, not in the main part. There are some cases where you would have to put in a bit more work, but those would be fewer and farther between. And if for a first pass you say, just going to take snippets every 10th of the way through the video, say. Listen to about 5 seconds, then move on, listen to another 5 seconds, move on, and decide, does this just look like someone else's stuff? Or is it actually its own thing? And then there would still be appeals procedure either way, but I feel like it would help with a lot of the false positives. And I hope that's the way the Blizzard are going to go. Ooh, level up. Yay! So I guess let's finish off that. And I hope that's the way the Blizzard are going to monitor YouTube. But human oversight is always good. Okay, what's next on the freight market? Doop-a-doop-a-doop. I am going to sneeze, so there might be a cut. Where is Montpellier? Oh, it's back where I came. Sure, why not? I'll take some cyanide. Where is the cyanide? Oh, right. I forgot that I wasn't actually in that bit here. Let's break. Doop. There we go. Now just need to find the trailer. Oh. Where is it? There you are. That's our Hitler. So the final big news story of the week, and it's not really a big news story, but I wanted to talk about it anyway, is Counter-Strike Go. Again, multiplayer game, so I've not played it, but it's a well-known game. It's a shooter. They have skins, and skins get sold between players. And the way that skins work in this game is they have rarity levels. We see lots of this artificial scarcity stuff in other games. It's not that unusual. It's just, you know, loot. Some of that's rarer than others, therefore is worth more to the player, except in this case, worth to the player can also be measured in actual money. But it has another level of scarcity. Or not necessarily scarcity, but rarity. It goes the sort of comic book route of skins being in mint condition. I think it's got its own names for this, and then skins get more degraded as I believe they get used. Which puts you in the weird position of, if you want a skin to keep its value, you don't want to actually use the skin, which means you don't want other people to see you've got the skin. Which is... that's actually... ooh, that's really weird. I don't know why Valve would do that. Because the best way of advertising, hey, this is a cool thing, is to see people using it. A much better way of doing it would be to have the skins actually kind of get higher quality as they get used. So yeah, maybe have them look a bit more degraded, but have that degradation look really cool. I think that's how I would do it, if I were some sort of soulless, corporate, money-making individual. But anyway, they have two levels of scarcity. And recently there was a one-of-a-kind, I think it was one-of-a-kind? Or maybe just incredibly rare skin auctioned off. This was a skin with the name of a popular, and I think they're a very successful esports player of CSGO, and it was a skin with their name on it. And we all know that autographs sell for a lot of money, so the fact that this was very valuable isn't unusual or noteworthy. But this skin sold for a lot of money. A lot of money. This sold on Valve's CSGO marketplace for a grand total of $61,052.63. The 63 cents bit is the figure that amuses me the most, I think. This is a huge amount of money on a marketplace which does a huge amount of transactions. And as I said, it's not... that by itself is not particularly noteworthy. What makes it more noteworthy to me is that Valve is creating this artificial scarcity, making certain skins more valuable than others, and promoting this so-called skin economy. Now, why would Valve do this? Well, Valve take away from every transaction a cut. Nothing particularly unusual there either. How much of a cut do they get? 15%. So from that $61,052.63 transaction, Valve netted just over $9,000, $9,157.89 if my maths is correct. So that was a pretty lucrative deal for them, and now it's starting to make sense why they are wanting to have all of these levels of rarity, and I've just realized why they have skins degrade, because they want at the end of it people to buy more skins from Valve. I still don't think that's the way I would go for it, but whatever. And at a certain point, it just starts seeming exploitative and absurd. Particularly when Valve takes such a large cut from it. Because if people want to trade in-game items in exchange for money, I think that's fine. If somebody wants something and another person has something, let's let people trade those things. Particularly when, so for instance, let's look at the old WoW character farmers. Really don't have a problem with this. Somebody wants to experience high-level play without putting in the effort to grind up a character. If you got the money, why not buy a character? It's... money can be exchanged for goods and services, right? But try and possibly, if you are actively creating this artificial scarcity in your economy, maybe try and look less greedy, Valve. Maybe try and cap your earnings on each sale. It doesn't even have to be that high, that lower cap. Like, just say you're only going to take... you'll take 15% or $100, whichever is lowest. Otherwise, one could be quite cynical and think that you are just creating rare skins for people to pay obscene amounts of money for so that you can take an obscene cut. Ah, yeah, but... well, at least my trailer wasn't damaged. Is there still a car in front of me? Yes, I am just pushing it along. Go, come on. No trailer damage. And we're good. Just flawless lorry driving there. But yeah, these stories of seeing people paying ridiculous amounts of money for in-game items, they don't... a lot of people have the reaction that these individuals have more money than sense, which suggests that in-game items have no value, which is just not true. Particularly in games which are incredibly long-term, like online, like sort of most multiplayer online games, right? Those have a lot of long-term potential, particularly on a series as storied as Counter-Strike. And I mean, that argument in and of itself gets its own... It shows itself as being ridiculous by the fact that when you're buying games, you're not actually buying a thing, you're now just buying data. And that's all you're doing with in-game purchases as well, so that's fine. But it's just when companies make a profit off their own scarcity kind of multiple times over. Because if we go back to, say, trading cards, that was a massively manufactured scarcity, right? Your shiny Charizards and your shiny Gyarados, they were rarer. And why were they rarer? Because they weren't printed as much. Not because of any natural process, not because people weren't buying them as much, because they were just being sold in loot crates. Not because of a lack of materials, not because people were damaging them, because they weren't printed as much. But we were more fine with that because when people sold their rare cards to their friends or sold them on eBay, the Pokemon Company weren't getting a cut out of that. I don't know who actually made the trading card game. I would hazard a guess at Wizards of the Coast, but that's because I would always hazard a guess at Wizards of the Coast. Let's get some petrol. Why not? I seem to be slightly low. Ah! Missed it. Let's go back. Oh, I really should pay more attention to this game. But this isn't my main save on the game. On my other one, I'm making money whenever I sleep. It's now more profitable for me to sleep than it is to actually drive around to places. In terms of time investment. But I think that's all I really want to say about Counter-Strike Go. I hope that whomever bought that skin enjoys it. Quite frankly. Okay, let's head off. So I've been playing a few games this week. I've actually started replaying Dark Souls 2. Which is interesting after completing Dark Souls 3. Mostly because I know that Dark Souls 2 is regarded as the black sheep in the family. As I've said a few times before, I've never played Dark Souls 1, but I enjoyed Dark Souls 2 when I played it. But I'm coming back to it, and the graphical downgrade is definitely getting to me. But I also... Oh, I've got a lot of money. I could actually buy a new driver. I probably should at some point. But yes, I remember people complaining about things like environment detail in Dark Souls 2, and I'm really not finding that it's not as ram-packed as Dark Souls 3. Of course it's not, but it's still got some really good environments. Quite frankly, I mean, let's ignore the Gutter and Black Gulch for the moment, because those poison-spitting statues can... Well, they can do something which I'm not going to say on this video, but you all know what I mean. And I actually found out that I thought I liked... What's it called? The pirate area, where you fight the Flexile Sentry. Oh, what is it? Completely forgotten. But I thought I liked that area more than it turns out I actually did. I was actually not enjoying going through there. Mostly, I think, because of there was just one particular area where you have to fight 3 people at once, and I kept dying there and it wasn't good. But yes, I'm quite enjoying that. I intended to actually start as a dex build. I did a dex build last time, but I intended to, go hugely for dex. I started off as... What was it even called? Was the high dex one Bandit? Or Thief, or something like that. And I started with a petrified something, which for those of you who don't know, essentially it's an item which you can put in a bird-shaped slot machine, and out pops a prize. So I did that, and came out with a massive strength weapon, so now I'm going hugely strength. So that's going to be, so that I can wield this one-handed. So that's going to be interesting. I like mixing up my playstyle based on what I find, and it's good. I got through the first bits quite a lot, but quite well, but then died so many times to the old Dragon Slayer. There's a tendency of thinking that once you've gotten through a game that you're... Ah! Whoops. Again, I wasn't entirely sure which part of the road I was supposed to be on. Let's back up. This is not good. Let's see if I can get this. Back. Here. Good, good, good. I'm such a safe driver. Okay. Can I now squeeze in here? I can! So yeah, there's a tendency of thinking that just because you've gotten through a game, just because you've beaten Pontiff Sullivan after a couple of attempts, that you're just going to steamroller through everything else, but no, no, no. But it's good fun. And talking about changing up what you do based on what you find, I've also been replaying, I guess playing actually, Pokemon Emerald. So my Pokemon history, I was one of those people who begged their parents for every Pokemon game. So I ended up with Pokemon's Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal, and Ruby and Sapphire. I don't think I got Emerald, because I was a chump and Game Freak made so much money from me nagging my parents. It's... oh, I really dislike that business practice of essentially selling the game twice, just with slightly different monsters in each one. I think Ruby and Sapphire is possibly the best they've done it, where it wasn't just a swap around of creatures when they actually had some slightly different plot lines. I mean, it still wasn't great what they did there. Most of the game being the same but being sold twice. But there we go. But yes, I've been playing Pokemon Emerald in the form of a Nuzlocke run. Which, for those of you who don't know, a Nuzlocke run has essentially 2 rules, and you can layer some other rules on top of there if you feel like it, and, you know, modify it to your heart's content, because it's just a way of you challenging yourself. And the first rule is that if a Pokemon faints, it's dead. You have to immediately release it or put it into a dead box in the Pokemon Center, and you can never use it again. Rule 2 is that you can only catch the first Pokemon you encounter in an area. Even if that Pokemon is something you've already got before, you can't catch anything else. Now I'm using a slight modification to that, where if I've caught the Pokemon before, I get 1 more shot. If that is again something which I have already got, then I either have to catch that or take nothing from the region. If you knock out the Pokemon you're trying to catch, you get nothing from the region. And it's kind of cool to see how things get mixed up. It's been making me use some Pokemon which I don't think I would have ever used before. It means that I now have like 3 ground types on my team, which is absurd. Because I think I've got a Camerupt, I've got a Swampert, because starting Pokemon, and I really like... I'm not a big fan of Mudkip, but Swampert I like. And what's the other ground type I've got? Oh yeah, Flygon, which is the only Pokemon on my team which knows Fly, because I've not got any birds. Oh yes, the other rule which most people tend to follow is that you always have to nickname your Pokemon so that you grow more attached to them. So far I've managed to only lose 1 Pokemon. I can't remember... oh yeah, I lost my Lombra, which I called Lily, to a high jump kick. Those crit chance moves are deadly. And you've got to be very careful, particularly in gyms, because you might start going on autopilot and think, this Pokemon seems... so you'd switch out if you're fighting, say... let's say you're in a fire gym, and you're fighting a... you're fighting a fighting type Pokemon, you might switch in, let's say, you might switch in your Tropius, which is a grass flying type Pokemon, thinking, ah yes, the flying type moves will be really good on this fighting type Pokemon, and you will just forget, oh, I'm in a fire gym, which means they've probably got some sort of TM fire type move, which is going to one-hit kill my Pokemon. So you've got to be quite careful of that. And also, so when you're playing Pokemon normally, you end up, whenever a Pokemon uses a stat-changing move, you generally think, ah, good. That's essentially a turn wasted for them. And usually, it is in this. However, if that ends up getting combined, if, for instance, if a Pokemon uses Howl to up its attack, that makes crits all the worse, and can quickly spell an end to your Pokemon. Poison also becomes your worst enemy, because if your Pokemon faints outside of battle, that still counts as death, so you need to get back to a Pokemon Center as quickly as possible, and if you can't do that before the Pokemon faints, you need an antidote. So it's quite interesting how that mixes everything up, and it also means much less of running around an area trying to find a specific Pokemon that you want, but also some interesting strategies of using repels to find the Pokemon that you do want, which is what I... Oh, nah! I really shouldn't drive along the hard shoulder. But also means strategies of using a repel to actually find the Pokemon you want. So that's, for instance, how I managed to get my Aron, and I was quite pleased with that. Because you go into a cave, and in the first zone, you've got a 10% chance of finding an Aron. In the second zone, you've got a 40% chance. So you want to get through that first zone as quickly as you can to get yourself an Aron, because while I've got nothing against Makuhita, I would much prefer to have a good Steel type. I am enjoying it, though. It's a good time. I'm also finishing up Life is Strange, and if I manage to finish it by the end of this week, I might get a video of that up on Friday, I think. I think probably about... I don't know how much of the way I am through episode 5. I think I've taken like the 4th optional photos, so maybe 40% of the way through, I guess. And episode 5 really isn't doing it for me. The first 4 I thought were really good, because for me, Life is Strange is all about character. It's about character interactions, it's not so much about the grand plot. And I think the problem that Don't Nod have had is that they got to episode 5 and they're like, we've got to tie up the loose strings, we've got to focus on plot, so there's less wandering around looking at things, talking to people, and also just less dialogue options. It's more just a direct route, usually through cutscene. And while the cutscenes are usually well acted, there was one at the end of episode 4 that I thought actually the dialogue was dreadful, which was a shame. But it's just, you're not getting enough differences in kind at the moment. That might change, but I've got a feeling that episode 5 is going to be, for me, the weaker gameplay episode, which provided some... which just tied up the plot. It was a necessary episode, but not necessarily fun episode to play. But as I said, I'm probably about 40% of the way through the episode. So we'll see if that changes, and I'm well aware that my opinions might change up until the credits roll, because this is a story-driven game, which means that I feel like I have to play it through to credits in order to make sure that my opinion is for myself valid. Other games I feel less like that, and I also still feel like that was close. I also feel like... That's what I wanted. The moment-to-moment gameplay loop is still more important. But just like with Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, the ending did help recontextualize everything that I've been doing up to that point. If what I've been doing up to that point wasn't fun, then that wouldn't change it, but it can make something which was good, great. So that's what I'm feeling. I'm also probably going to play some more Final Fantasy XII. If this copyright dispute doesn't get sorted by the end of the day, then I don't think I'm going to be doing any more than 3 videos on it. Because I was thinking about potentially just let's playing it, because I enjoyed the game. But I don't want to go through this every time. I have got better things I could be spending my effort on. But if it gets resolved by the end of the day, that might very well happen. And I think that's all I really want to talk about this week. Managed to get to an hour. If you have enjoyed this episode, I would very much appreciate it if you would like it, and if you want to see more like it, please do subscribe to my channel. I do lots of other things. I do Let's Plays of possibly Final Fantasy XII, and also Deus Ex Mankind Divided. I do looks at games. I do more of this, and I also do Hitman videos. I really enjoy the latest Hitman games, so I keep doing featured contracts on it, so that's fun. If you have any objections to anything I've said in this video, please do give me a comment. If there are things you want me to talk about, again, just comment underneath it. I will try to read as many comments as possible. I'll try to reply to as many comments as possible. And above all, I hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. Goodbye!